Good morning, everybody. Please can I start the meeting of the Council by asking if you could all remain standing for civic prayers. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. Item 1, announcements or special business. I've not been notified of any announcements or special business today. Item 2, apologies. Do we have any apologies for today's council meeting?
Councillor Pat Ryan, Councillor Davis, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Murphy, Councillor Pugh, Councillor Orr, Councillor Warmshire, Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have any personal, prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interests that they need to declare at this meeting? Can I ask members with interest to now declare them? Okay, thank you. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on 20th of January 2016 and 24th of February 2016. Are the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 20th of January 2016 and the 24th of February 2016 approved as a correct record?
Well, it refers to me as the City Council's representative on the North West Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. I'm actually the independent chairman. It's quite embarrassing to be described as the City Council's representative when I'm supposed to be independent. So I wonder if I could have that amendment.
No, please, thank you. We've got a new item 5A. The City Mayor will make some announcements before he makes his statement. City Mayor.
Can I introduce myself first? Stephen Stewart, the current City Mayor of the City of Salford. And as is my custom, although this is quite an unusual agenda today, but as is my custom, I like to take the opportunity to record into the record any notable dates or persons who may have passed away. And in line with that, I want to institute the new system of Salford salutes. And I want today to salute Councillor David Lancaster, who has been awarded the MBE. He is not himself too enamored with the monarchical system, but he is really very proud on behalf of his family, and we are proud of him too. Julie Flaherty, for services to paediatric nursing on Greater Manchester. Julie is a children's nurse consultant at Salford Royal Hospital Trust, and she has been awarded the MB. We salute Julie Flaherty. The British Empire Medal has been awarded to David Robert Pike of Erwin for services to the Fire and Rescue Service and the community in Greater Manchester. David is well known to me as we live in the same village, and he is a very good active member of our own community, but wider still. Congratulations, and we salute David Pike. And last but not least, in terms of the honours, the British Empire Medal to Shine Fester, who was a Holocaust survivor, and he has been recognised for services to Holocaust education. Anybody who hears Shine talk will know the depth of his spirit, having come through such a terrible period in his life, and for those round about him too. We should not ever forget the impact of that Holocaust. Now, sad news this week. We salute Mr. Mr Chaim Fester as well. Sad news this week that I've lost a couple of very good friends. Nora Emsley, who worked with me at the Transport and General Workers Union for 20 years, passed away this week. A good active member of her own community and St Luke's Roman Catholic Church. We have lost former Councillor Peter Grimshaw, who everybody knows. Both Peter and his father were key councillors in the Labour group for many, many years and very active in their communities. And though it doesn't relate directly to Salford now, it's my sad duty to inform you that John Evans, former MP, has passed away, and it's his funeral today. John was the MP for Irlam and Cadishead for many years and well loved in the district. Again, sad news this week that Salford-born composer Sir Peter Maxwell Davies died at the age of 81. Sir Peter always understood the working class ethic of making the arts and music relate to the interests of the people of Salford, and he played a key role in the revitalisation of Salford docks with others, as you'll hear later. And the city has also lost another of its very favoured and famous sons, Tony Warren. Tony Warren, the inventor of Coronation Street, which has run for many, many years. Tony Warren, with his Coronation Street exercise, changed the nature of television, not only here in the UK, but across the globe, because what we now call soap operas, was literally invented by Salford's Tony Warren. Tony Warren was also a great campaigner for the LGBT community, both in Salford and wider, and we should acknowledge that today. So Salford salutes Tony Warren. I think, Mr Chairman, at this point we can leave the announcements there.
Thank you, City Mayor. I would just like to say something about Tony Warren. I worked with him for many, many, many years. He was a dynamic man. He was born and remained in Salford for most of his life. He was a true creative genius, resident of Salford City Council. He brought real life into our homes. I know many other people owe their careers to Tony. I'm attending his funeral on Friday to pay respects on behalf of the city. Thank you. Item 5, statement of the elected city mayor. 1 hour. That's 60 minutes, no seconds. Just acknowledge this is the city mayor's last council meeting. Thank you, city mayor.
Can I thank you, Chairman, for bringing that welcome news that this is my last full city council as the directly elected executive city mayor of Salford. The 4 years has passed very quickly, and I have to say that today I intend to make a short statement about my own feelings. I want to then thank a number of people, but then I want to take quite the unusual step of showing this chamber and the people of Salford just why it's important to be involved in the democratic political process and the impact that the role of politicians can play on the interests of the people of this city. So, first, of course, I need to do my thank yous. My first thanks must go to David Lancaster, who has been my deputy for the last 4 years. David has spent a lifetime, and I mean a real lifetime, serving the people of this city, brought his family up and his commitment to his family. That is something that we should all be proud of, and I think David, when he received his MBE just recently, whilst it may have been a wee bit embarrassing to him personally, understood how proud his family was. So my thanks to David for his unstinted support over those 4 years. I will, of course, to each of these people directly say something much more personal. Now, I need to say thank you to the full mayoral team. That's all of the councillors who have been involved, both as cabinet members and support members, and I will name them because I think it's important to get it on the record. In no particular order: John Murray, John Walsh, Lisa Stone, Roger Jones, Stephen Cohen, Peter Connor, Anne-Marie Humphreys, Paul Dennett, John Mullen, John Ferguson, Derek Antrobus, Bill Hines, Gina Merritt, Paula Boschel and Margaret Morris. Each of them in turn has served this council and the people of the city, some of them still in post, whilst I'm in post till May, and I want to say thanks to them because it hasn't been easy. It's been quite a torrid 4 years in relation to government cuts, but I'll say more about that later. I want to also say thank you to officers, past and present. Officers, and there may be some that I miss here, but I'll make sure that I do thank them appropriately. But officers like Barbara Spicer, Nick Page, Sue Lightup and Martin Vickers, who have left the council and gone on to other things, but I thank them for the good work that they did whilst they were here. There is other people like John Woodhouse and others that I would like to contact directly to thank. Of course, I have to thank the current leadership, Jim Taylor and his senior officers, too many to mention in total, but of course Ben Dolan, Neil Thornton, now Miranda, and Karen Hurst and Charlotte Ramsden. The team at the senior level, and there's more than that, but the team at the senior level know the work that they carry out on behalf of this council and the people of the city, and I want to record my appreciation to them. It stands, of course, that behind the senior officers in the council is the workforce, and I have never resiled from saying that it is not the politicians that deliver the services that the people of the city need, it is the workforce. They deliver the services to those in need on our behalf, and I am undyingly grateful to them for the work that they've done for the people of this city. Our workforce do not get the recognition, nor indeed the terms and conditions that they actually deserve. I hope that a time comes in the future when that will be recognised properly. But I do want to place on record my absolute thanks and appreciation for the work that they do. I think, Mr. Chairman, that the ethos of this council has been, before my time, but particularly during my time, a partner-based ethos. And I have been absolutely privileged to work with the key representatives of partners in the city, and I use only a small number by way of example because of time constraints, but the University of Salford, Salford Royal Hospital Trust, the Clinical Commissioning Group, Manchester West Mental Health Trust, Greater Manchester Police, the GMCA, that's the Combined Authority, and Salford CVS, only to name a few. There are many, many more. But my grateful thanks to all of those organisations for the work they do on behalf of the people of this city. Now, of course, I want to thank my own office staff. Whoever. There's Joanne Farrell, Liz Holland, Tom Curran, and what's the other last name? Jackie McPhail. And if I told you that those officers not only service David and I, but also Paula Boschel and Paul Bennett, I think you can't grasp the commitment, where they come in early, they leave late, they don't get extra for it, they go beyond, they go that extra mile, not just because it's supporting me and the other politicians, it's because it's for the people of Salford. And I, again, will give them my personal thanks directly when I get the chance. Now, Mr. Chairman, a couple of words about my family. It's too emotional for me to go into detail here, but let me just say this. My family have put up with me over the last 50-odd years. My family have supported me over the last 50-odd years, and they deserve better from me. I hope that in the next phase of my time, after I've finished in this role in 8 weeks' time, that I can be more attentive and do the things that maybe I should have been doing better as a father and a grandfather over the last 50 years. But of course, without their support, I could not have sustained my 4 years in this, the most demanding of jobs. And of course, finally, in thank you terms, the people of Salford for their continued support for myself and the Labour Party over all the years, not just the last 4 years. I do want to say something about the opposition, but I'll save it till later, if they don't mind. I think it's fair enough to say that the Labour group needs to be thanked for their 100% support of me, undying loyalty. Oh no, that was the other draft. Sorry. The Labour group, the Labour Party is a contentious alliance. We are a family, we have rows, but we have one common aim, and that is to meet the interests of the people of this city. To meet the interests of the people of this city. And I hope to be able to show that sometimes the opposition and the ruling Labour group can come together in the interest of the city a bit later on. So, my 4-year stretch, my 4-year term of office is due to come to an end in 8 weeks' time. Don't be fooled. It's business as usual, right up to the last minute. In fact, it may even get more intense over the last 8 weeks of my term. But I can tell you that it has been a 4-year challenge. It's been interesting, sometimes very exciting, but it has always been very, very demanding. Those who work closely with me know what I'm talking about. And I think that it is imperative that, and I'll say something about it later, it is imperative that at some future point that we explain better to the people of this city just what their politicians do for them in their behalf. I'll try a little bit of that later on. Now, I intend to spend no time on negatives. I could fill my books and spend the whole of this hour talking about extremists, attacks, falsehoods, abuse of vulnerable people by politicising them. That is a distraction, and it's minimal in this city compared to the real issue. And the real issue in this city is to be absolutely working hard in the interest of the people of the city and their families. And that's what this council does to the best of our ability. That sometimes isn't enough. I acknowledge that. But I much prefer fact to fiction. I prefer truth to fantasy. I prefer unity to disunity. I prefer trust and confidence to suspicion and mistrust. I prefer hope to hopelessness. I prefer shared interests, shared aims, shared outcomes, and the shared destiny of the people of Salford. Those are my principles, my interests. Yes, we're human. We fall short at times. That's absolutely true. But we at all times do our best in the circumstances. Now, I was once asked to define what politicians were. And it wasn't any use me deciding how to define politicians, because I think that the late Professor Bernard Crick got it right when he said that politicians are imperfect people trying to run an imperfect system. I agreed with that. But I was then asked to define politics. And I found myself making the following statement, which I believe indicates my own personal approach. I found myself saying that politics is the art of the visionary. That is, you need people who can push the boundaries of ideas. But the doing of politics is the art of the negotiator. That is, you must seek to secure the most appropriate and sustainable settlement in the circumstances. Now, they might appear different, but actually one without the other is no good. There's a recognition that you need to be idealistic and have vision, but at the same time you may not reach the full vision. Getting some way towards it is sometimes the most sustainable approach. So, if there was a weakness that I would like to admit to, I'd say one of my biggest weaknesses is that I've never been good at telling people what I've done. I've never been good at recording what I've done. I've been selfish. I've wanted to get on to the next big problem, to deal with it. And actually, I think there's an element of that in the character of Salford. We don't shout loud enough about the good things. That means that those that wish to spread disunity and negativity, they're allowed to fester within the public perception. Well, maybe we should actually start to say these are the good things. I think that even if the record is flawed, it's important to state it. It can always be corrected in the future, but there can be no future without the past. So our yesterday determines how we arrive at today, and today determines how we arrive at our tomorrow, in my view. That's why I think we collectively have to get better in Salford at how we both record and represent the good things we've done. So what I'd like to do now, I've been in recent years requested to do speeches, lectures, and the question that is on everybody's lips about Salford is, how did we regenerate Salford Quays? What's the history of the regeneration of Salford Quays? There is no history, single history, of the regeneration of Salford Quays. There are only histories. What people normally mean by the history, they mean the construction, the development, the commercial history. That is a history. Peel built it, in the main, Peel own it. But there's also a cultural history, there's a social history, and there's a political history. And what I want to do today, notwithstanding that there was much involvement from key council officers and construction industry and other developers and players, I want today to concentrate on the role of politicians, and just to demonstrate to you how an issue that has given this city its greatest success, the reimagining of Salford Quays, was indeed a political vision, and that political vision was shared and supported by every councillor in this room that was there at the time and throughout that time. That includes the opposition. So, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'll now move to the front. When people ask me, what do councillors do? Well, normally I find myself saying, well, the Cabinet actually is a very important job, very responsible job. It means that the politicians that are Cabinet members have the responsibility for making decisions up to £1 million per decision, not per day, not per week, month or year, but per decision. That is a heavy responsibility in this city. But really, you then go on to see that there's a lacuna, there's a vacuum as to what do the rest of you do. How important are you to the people of this city? Well, I'm going to do this case study just to give you a feel what most people in this city don't know and don't understand. And I believe all too many people in this council are also unaware of. Now, in relation to what was called Manchester Docks, which we all know is Salford Docks, and in Salford, and it's never moved, and it won't ever in my lifetime. But when you talk about the role of politicians, what we need to know is how did a city, a post-industrial city in decline, reimagine itself? Where did it start? Who started it? Well, I have to tell you that the reimagining of Salford Docks, of Salford Quays, politely called, is what I call about the Imagineers Union. And I'll describe to you in a moment who is in the Imagineers Union, just some of them. But a short story. The first time I was asked to do this presentation was about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, and I was invited by the Digital UK organisation to do an address in London to a global conference. And at that conference, I had to do this presentation, but I was asked for a title, and I didn't have a title. Same week, my wife and I went to see the Philharmonic. The Philharmonic on the Quays is open free of charge. 40% of all tickets to any Philharmonic performance is open free of charge to the people of Salford. And Mez and I went to see Boy George perform with the Philharmonic. It was a stunning evening. Afterwards, Mez got her photograph with Boy George, so she was elated, been there, done that, and got the T-shirt. As we were walking out, we'd had a lovely time, and as we turned to the quays for the vista, and it was a very dark night, and all the lights were shining on the water, and there was a laser show on, Mez put her arm through mine. Now, after 54 years, I thought there was something a bit strange about that. But she put her arm through mine, and I looked at her, and she was a bit glassy-eyed, and we're getting in more trouble here. She was a bit glassy-eyed, and she said, "Just think, this was a fragment of your imagination." And at that moment, my ego kicked in, and I thought, that's my title, a fragment of my imagination. But in a nanosecond, my humility kicked in, because of course, it wasn't just about my imagination, it was about others. And the others that made a contribution to this, I'm now going to describe to you. It's who I call the Imagineers Union. And so the title was Fragments of Our Imaginations. It's a collective. Do you remember what I said about politics being the art of the visionary, but the doing of politics is the collective act? That's so I titled the talk I did in London as Fragments of Our Imagination. And it starts like this.
Manchester's name is known the world over for many things. Who, for instance, has not listened to the famous Harry Oakes? For so many years, under its brilliant conductor, Sir John Barbary. To others, Manchester means football, United and City, both famous clubs with enviable reputations. But had it not been for the building of the port in the late 19th century, it is true to say that this inland city would have meant little to anyone. ocean-going vessels bring food and raw materials from many lands. Swiftly from the terminal docks, the cargoes are unloaded and carried by road, rail and water to the factories and workshops of industrial Britain. On their outward voyages, the ships carry manufactured goods, textile, pottery, cars and tractors, chemicals, machinery, iron and steel. In fact, all those products on which the prosperity of Great Britain depends. By road, rail and water, the port of Manchester serves the most densely populated industrial area in the United Kingdom. Here live craftsmen and engineers, skilled workers and artisans with a long tradition of intricate jobs well done. They work in the mines, the mills and the factories in this great industrial zone. To Manchester, the nearest port, the results of their labours flow in an endless stream for shipment to the rest of the world.
Now, a potted history, Salford Docks, Salford Quays in 3 minutes. And what it does is it gives you a feel from where we've been to where we are now. It doesn't yet give you any inkling of where we should be in the future. But how did that success? It's an acknowledged success both nationally and internationally. We are the most enterprising city outside London in this country, in my view. We are the fastest growing city outside London in this country. Yet we are a city with problems. So how do politicians go about addressing those problems? Well, this case study, and this is only one thing that the politicians have initiated and carried out. There are many, many others. But it starts with a vision, an idea, and courage. Derelict Dockland, post-industrial city in decline, and this man comes in to play. The chairman of planning in Salford City Council, Councillor Ben Walsworth. Ben Walsworth was on the Manchester Ship Canal board as Salford City Council's representative. He was there on the day it was announced on the board that Manchester City, the main shareholder, wanted to sell the canal for £3 million or thereabouts. Ben left the room, phoned the then chief executive, Roger Rees, and said, "I want to buy the canal." And when this man, Les Hoff, the then leader, picked the chief executive off the floor, I've lost my punchline. But the chief executive said to Ben Walsworth, "Councillor Walsworth, why would we want to buy 30 miles of defunct, derelict waterway?" And Ben said, "It's not the water, man. It's the land. It's the land." And there was then a campaign of vilification of Ben Walsworth and this council, where it was alleged in the press that this council was exercising an abuse of public money in trying to use public money to buy a defunct waterway. And the outcome was, as we know, that Peel Holdings bought the canal for 4-point-something million, and Ben and the council bought the quays for 1-point-something million. One of the most brave, courageous acts, and 96-year-old Ben Walsworth is sat over there. Give him a round of applause. Salford salutes you, Ben. Salford salutes you. He still does his constitutional crawl round Eccles every day, keeping himself fit. And, of course, we move on from that brave and courageous decision to what do you do with the derelict dockland that you now own? Well, that was the Sorcerer's Apprentice. That was Ben's apprentice back in the day when the quays were bought. Well, you start to do this. Now, what's this? That's the building of the Lowry, a state-of-the-art, world-class arts theatre complex on a derelict dockland. Snap dab in the middle of a derelict dockland. Why? Why would you want to do that investment? Because it showed what could be done in that area. And the person who led on that was that man, Councillor William Hines. He had the bravery, working with this man and this man, to drive through, even with questions being raised in this council and the Labour group about whether this was a good investment, but the courage, the vision to drive through right to the point of success in showing what could be done on a derelict dockland. So today, Bill, Salford salute. Well done. Pass me a water, David, please. The next phase after the 80s, and when Ben had led his vision, when Bill had led his vision, the next phase was about a vision for the theme of the city. And that came about, in part, there are many people and organisations that think they invented Media City. And in their terms, they'll be correct. The construction industry will believe that they invented it. You know, other bodies will believe they invented it. But it did start with the politician's vision. And the contribution in 1997, I was MP, I rang Bill and asked what sort of promoting Salford package do we have, because we had Taiwanese business people who wanted to come to Salford to do a trade delegation. And we didn't have much of anything other than economic development leaflets, so I held a conference at Salford University. I was a new MP. I'd already done an inaugural speech at the university, and when this issue came up, I asked the university if they would allow me to run a conference. So Bill and I ran a conference. There were about 50 organisations. Hazel Blears was there as one of the local MPs. John Willis, Bill was there. David Johnson, the Chief Education Officer from the council, was there. And what I said to them was this: we are a post-industrial city in decline, and we've got an identity crisis. Some people from the west of Salford don't think they're from Salford. Some of them don't want to be from Salford, if we're honest about it. And people from the east of the city, the old city, have a Salford identity. And it was pretty polarised at the time. And so we knew that we had to try and develop a whole Salford identity. But we knew that that would have to be started at school as an educative process over many years. So what did we do in the meantime? So I put a proposal. And I said, the city needs a theme. And if America has its Silicon Valley, Scotland's got its Silicon Glen, then why shouldn't Salford have its Silicon Canal? Recognising and acknowledging the economic and technological driver of Salford, Manchester and Liverpool. I'd add Warrington and Cheshire into that now. So the concept of the Silicon Canal, which is referred to frequently in the financial papers, was born. But there were 3 pillars to the proposal at the university. And the first was a theme for the city. Now, as a new politician, I gave it the most descriptive name you could hear of. I called it, we need to have a theme that is the informing, communicating, enabling, technological, broadcasting and media centre of the north of England. Snappy. Some bright spark called it Media City some years later. But the concept, the seed for theming the city, was brought about at the conference that Bill and I held at Salford University. The second platform that went with the theme was that there had to be a learning partnership, because we knew that if the theme was successful and we eventually got the high-quality, high-paid jobs here, our kids and our workforce needed the skill sets to access those jobs. So the second platform was a proposal for a learning partnership where the university, the colleges at the time, the schools, the council, would meet together and identify the best quality general education for the kids of our city. But if the theme of the city was to be new media, broadcasting, tech, then the overarching theme of the education learning system should have been the same. And the third element, even I didn't know what I was talking about at the time, was what I called a digital nerve centre building. Digital and creative incubator hub. I just knew back in 1997 that digital was going to be the coming thing, and Salford should have its nose in somewhere. The thing moved on, and Bill picked up the theme with the council and some university support, entered into partnership with Peel, and built what we call Media City. An American professor, I think, was the person who named Media City. And that's been done in the last 8 years only. The whole of what you see there has been built in 8 years only. But unfortunately, the learning partnership and the digital nerve centre didn't come on stream at the same time. So one of our weaknesses we must admit to is that there's a dislocate between the learning aspects and the doing. The doing was done magnificently. But then we come to the next phase. And the next significant phase was the securing of the BBC as the anchor organisation. And the person that led the vision on that was John Merry. Yes, Barbara Spicer did a magnificent job. Those of us that saw the presentation she did and the work that she did. But I'm talking here today, and there will be a further presentation about the role of officers at some time in the future and the role of construction. But today we concentrate on the politicians. And that was driven forward by John Merry. That was the single most significant coup in the whole of this process, because in deciding to come to Salford, the BBC actually had 2 choices. It could go to Ardwick in Manchester or to the Quays in Salford. And basically, Ardwick would have been adequate for a UK centre for the BBC. But Salford Quays would have been adequate for their global new headquarters. And what people don't seem to realise is that the BBC in Salford Quays is the most advanced broadcaster in the world. As a public service, they can't say that. Nobody in the world could have produced the Olympics the way our BBC from Salford did. And so John had the vision and the political will to lead that forward with this man, his deputy, and others, including this man. Takes a good photograph, that guy, doesn't he? Now, when they moved forward, the next phase, because what we did with the BBC was we said to the BBC, come to Salford Quays and we will surround you with an ecosystem of creative and digital start-up industries. And that helped to attract them to come. Now, at this point, I held off from my compliments and thanks to the Conservative group earlier, because I wanted to highlight where working in partnership, it can be to the interests of Salford. And today I do want to pay tribute to Councillor Karen Greedle, because when John and David and Derek were leading on behalf of the council, the Labour group in the council, they tell me they couldn't have done it without Karen's support. And because it was in the interests of the people of Salford, the full support of Karen and her group at the time helped to make it a reality. So today, thank you, Karen, for that work too. The next phase after that was convincing the university to come to the Quays. I went, as soon as I knew that John and the team had secured the BBC, I went to the Vice-Chancellor and Chancellor of Salford University and said, you must have a state-of-the-art campus next to the BBC, next to the creative and digital industries. We need the co-location of world-class learning with a business model that's unique. And so what happened was the university built what is one of the most advanced university campuses in the world on Salford Quays. I went to the college next, to Salford College, and spoke to the principal, and he bought into the concept of the college having a campus next to the university, next to the BBC, next to the creative industries. And so when we got through the learning process and the co-location of learning next to the BBC, of course, it spiralled. The success bred success, because then ITV wanted to come. Then lots of other companies wanted to come. Now, the next, if you remember the third pillar of the 1997 vision, the digital incubator hub, what I called the Digital Nerve Centre. Well, that was developed in the last 4 years, 5 years. It's wholly owned by the council, and I'm the chairman of the board on behalf of the council. And again, it is one of the most advanced technological buildings, certainly in Europe, if not the world. And its potential is immense. My idea was that we needed a digital nerve centre that would link into every school, college and university in Salford, every organisation, giving us that connections and communications that are vital in the modern age. I will come to the relevance of all this to Salford people in a bit, because one of the disconnects between the learning partnership being established and the building of the Quays meant that the good, well-paid jobs were here, but our workforce and our kids didn't have the skill sets to access them. That was a shame, and I regret that. But now we can move forward, and we're remedying that as we speak. And that will disappear, because we will have a raft of young people with the skill sets to access these jobs. The Landing has around 100 and odd start-ups in the building, that building alone. And there are hundreds of start-ups all round the BBC, just as we predicted and promised they would do. Sorry, back. John, David drove the Landing forward, initiated the building, and as I say, it's one of our greatest assets. That photograph, and it is a photograph, it's not a retouched or painted, it's a photograph, a genuine photograph. Lets you see what Mez and I saw the night we walked out of Phil and looked at the Quays. And to be quite frank, Media City UK is a stunning success, acknowledged nationally and internationally. Now, what's about the future? Because you can't stand still and you can't have one egg in the basket. Your job, past my time, will be collectively to identify new and emerging industries that are complementary to the successes that we have already achieved. And one of those successes that's already on the table is Port Salford. Port Salford if you remember the little video, it said by rail, road and water, and it went defunct. Port Salford will revitalise exactly that again. Port Salford will be the largest freight terminal, trimodal freight terminal in the whole of Europe. And we have to make sure, as a council, that the owners of the different companies meet their obligations to the people of this city. And if we find that they're not doing that, then we criticise them and we will cajole them and we will do everything in our power to make sure that the jobs that are there are relevant and accessible by the people of this city. Now, the next thing on the horizon that we've got already is again a stunning, brave piece of work by this council. Risk is something that this council is not averse to. This history on its own, this single political history, shows that this is a brave council and is prepared to take risks. And we have taken a brave decision to make a bid and be successful in gaining what will be the 5th National Royal Horticultural Society garden in the country. That garden will not only enhance the ecology of the place, it will create jobs, it will create challenges that we have to face and collectively deal with. But if you think about it in these terms, it will build over a 5-year period, we are told, to a footfall of 1 million. Not in the first year or the second year or third year, but over that 5-year period, it's expected that it will build to a footfall of 1 million. Now, if you look at the other gardens in the country, there are specific times when people come to these gardens. They are very late morning and they leave early in the afternoon. So there's a period during the day that this will happen. But just bear this in mind, for by the enhanced ecological situation, for by the enhanced facility, you also, for approximately every 50 visitors to Salford, you either create a job or maintain a job. So it's a job creation exercise as well, in the gardens and outside. The other aspect to this garden is that it will be a learning centre. I'm hoping that actually it will become a national college for horticulture. It opens pathways to links with the landing so that there will be a digital aspect of it, and it also opens pathways, I hope, to the aims of those councillors who live in Irlam, Caryshead, Winton and Barton and Worsley, to make sure that the land on the mossland is preserved for the people of this city. And there are great potentials for us to actually make that situation better. So, why am I interested? Why are you interested in all this glossy economic growth, attracting inward investment? Well, yes, jobs are important. Jobs with good, decent wages and terms and conditions are close to my heart, as you would expect. But what really motivates me personally is that ward there, Worsley Boostown, and that ward there, Winton, I know it's hard to see, but are significant. My motivation, and this council's motivation, for economic growth, ever-increasing economic growth, has to be for a purpose. Not just to make people wealthy. I've got no problem with people earning a lot of money. I have a real problem with people who don't have enough. I resent that. So how can this possibly impact on that? Well, let's just take health itself. We know for a fact that males in Salford live several years less than males down south. People keep using Surrey, but down south and in other parts of the country. There isn't anybody in this room that actually knows why that is. And it is important to understand it, but that's for the researchers and the academics to tell us. I'm more interested and how you alleviate it. And I know, and you know, that decent work with decent pay for those that can do work is one of the best pathways out of poverty and deprivation. And if we can create those decent jobs with decent pays, then we can help minimise the number of people who are in the most vulnerable category. And we can use our resources better to protect them better. There lies a paradox. Who in this room can tell me the difference between the most vulnerable people and vulnerable people? It's actually very, very difficult. Yes, there are definitions, professional definitions, but for politicians, it's really difficult. We as a council, and I include everybody in this room, want to do the best for every person who has needs in this city. But we can't. We know we can't. So we do the best we can by prioritising the most vulnerable. But I've always been totally open and honest with the people of this city in my time, that if we concentrate and prioritise for the most vulnerable, there are vulnerable people, those who still have needs, that will no longer be able to get the service, the excellent services that this council has built up over the years. Now, let me tell you this. I know that there are extremists who exploit and abuse vulnerable people and politicise them. But I want to say today, to those families who have had who have less of a service now, I regret that deeply. I personally regret those families being in that situation. And there's nobody in this room, in this council, who thinks otherwise. But our job is not to dwell in helplessness. Our job is to create hope. And we create hope by doing what we are best at. One of the things when we move on to discuss why growth is important, decent jobs with decent pay, has to be tempered also by a council who campaigns. And we have a unanimous agreement in this council for this Charter of Employment Standards. And we campaign. There are now 90 non-statutory organisations, that's the voluntary sector and the private sector, who have signed up to this charter. There is no Charter of Employment Standards anywhere in local government like Salford's charter, which was unanimously supported by the whole of this council. And so, yes, we want to create more and more jobs with decent salaries, but we also want to create the learning situation where people of Salford can get the skills to access those jobs, and we want to make sure that our employers are good employers and productive employers and successful employers by making sure that they adhere to those standards and more, because they are minimum standards. So really, we have a rounded policy here in Salford. That presentation is about selling Salford to the wider world, because we know in our hearts that that's only one part of Salford. It's not the whole thing. We have our challenges, but we are a proud historic city that sits within a vibrant city region. The city region may actually be the only council in 10 authorities at some time in the future. But I know this: don't ever be afraid of losing your own identity. The Salford identity is too strong. It will never disappear, no matter what government does, no matter what anybody else does. Be proud, be aware of what you are and what you want to be. And I wish you all the very best in that endeavour on behalf of the people of this city. Thank you very much. Just so the technical people can move things around, so if they want to have a short walk along the corridor, please feel free to do so. But please be back to me within a couple of minutes.
Well, looks as though we're having a break. Thank you. 5 minutes. I would like now to present Mr. Ian Stewart, City Mayor, with his gift, his retirement gift.
Do I need to declare this? Yes.
On behalf of City Council, Salford City Council, would like to present you with this gift in recognition of your service over the last 4 years.
Thank you.
It's been an honour working with you, Stuart, during my term as ceremonial mayor, and I wish you all the very best for the future. And then, of course, thank you. Mayor Stewart, please. Mayor Stewart. Please accept this as an appreciation of your support. Thank you. Thank you very much. I wish you better. And there's there you go. Councillor Eric Burgoyne. Eric has served as councillor representing the Little Hulton ward since 1999. It's a pleasure to present your retirement gift, and to my dear friend, thank you. Councillor Andy Cheetham. Andy has served as councillor representing the Boothstown and Ellenbrook wards since 2008. Please accept this as a token of our appreciation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Mayor, members, a number of people have asked me over the years how I actually got involved in politics in the first place. And I have to say that I've asked myself that same question as well. But the answer is quite simple, really. I was pretty naive at the time. I was rather unhappy with the way the council was looking after or not looking after my area. And rather than sort of do the usual thing that most people do, which is just moan and say they should do something about it, I stood for council with a view to trying to influence the things that were happening or not happening in my area. One of the best pieces of advice I've had as a councillor was to be warned that beware of going out of your way to do something for one person, because if you're successful you could upset 99 others. Really good advice. By the time I got it though, I'd already found that out for myself. Finally, I'd just like to thank all members, past and present, for their civility during my stay here. What happens outside this chamber is not necessarily a reflection of what happens in. I'd also like to thank all the officers over the years who've helped me resolve some issues in my ward. But above all, I'd like to thank my fellow ward councillors, Robin and Gillian. We are totally different characters, but we have formed a good team over the years, and I'd just like them to know that I won't be disappearing. I will be around to help whenever I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Gina Merritt. Gina has served as councillor representing the Swinton South Ward since 2012. Please accept this as a token of appreciation.
Thank you very much. Can I say a couple of words? Thank you. Thanks a lot. Very briefly then, I would like to say it's been a real pleasure to have been a councillor, and many thanks to Howard and our team in Swinton South these last 4 years. I'd like to thank Ian for giving me the opportunity of working completely out of my comfort zone. And also David Lancaster and Derek for supporting me in working completely outside of my comfort zone. But really I also want to thank the fantastic officers in housing and environment and regulatory services who have actually done the work and have just been an inspiration to work with. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gina. Councillor Sue Pugh. Sue has served as a councillor representing the Claremont ward since 2012. All right. So, Councillor, thank you for telling her all the best. Councillor Pat Ryan. Pat has served as a councillor representing the Little Hulton ward since 2006. Unfortunately, Pat is in the hospital at the moment, so can't be here today. I would therefore like to present Councillor Brenda Ryan with a token of our appreciation, and on behalf of the City Council, we wish her a speedy recovery. Thank you.
I'm not going to dare to speak on Pat's behalf, but can I thank you for all your best wishes over the last few months. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Interval for 10 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. All be seated, please. Thank you. Item 7, receipt of petitions. Do we have any petitions that need to be received? Councillor Ferdinand.
I've got a petition here from the residents of the Agecroft Hall estate in Pendlebury. As I walk around the city, and indeed around Agecroft, I see on the British Telecom green cabinets, superfast broadband is here. And as the Mayor, City Mayor rightly said in his presentation just recently, we've been moving on apace and we are a digital city. It's impossible to imagine that we'd be where we are today a few years ago, and goodness knows where we're going to be in 5 more years' time. But to do all these things, we need fast broadband connections. And for most of us, that's the case. But the residents in Agecroft, on the Agecroft Hall estate, they have appalling broadband speeds, not able to participate in what many of us take for granted. British Telecom are refusing to install fibre broadband on their estate, and therefore they are asking the council to do whatever we can do to influence British Telecom to install fibre broadband on their estate. So I present the petition for, I think it's 160-something residents.
Councillor Lee. Thank you.
The problems with this IT system we have sometimes. I've got a petition from 169 residents of Falcon Crescent with regard to the state of grass verges on Falcon Crescent. I'd like to hand it to the appropriate officer.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Okay. Item 8.
Sorry, just on the petitions.
Okay, sorry.
On the petitions for the minutes, Chair, an e-petition was received by the Council, but I took the view that this related to an ongoing litigation matter and have not accepted it as a petition. I believe that that is something that is now in the press, but it was a decision not to accept it because it's relating to ongoing legal matters.
Okay, thank you. Item 8, Pay Policy Statement 2016-17. The Strategic Assistant Mayor, Innovation, Growth and Prosperity is asked to present the Pay Policy Statement, after which I will permit members to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, the Pay Policy Statement for 2016-17 is here for noting and approval today. Yet again, Salford City Council is leading the way in tackling low pay within our pay structure. Increasing the real living wage, and I differentiate here between George Osborne's living wage, from £7.85 to £8.25 per hour. This is an increase of 40p per hour, and it will be implemented from the 1st of April 2016. This will benefit 428 members of staff within this organisation. Nationally, we're informed through the Living Wage Foundation that 68,000 members of staff are going to benefit from the living wage uplift this year, which is a fantastic achievement in terms of our endeavours as progressive employers in terms of tackling low pay. We are also the only accredited living wage employer, local authority employer, still within Greater Manchester. So as you can see, there's still room for development here on this agenda. And we continue with our aspirations to see Salford become a living wage city. In addition to this, I think one of the things that's important about the pay policy statement is looking at the pay ratios within the document. And I'm pleased to announce that the ratio for the highest to lowest paid has yet again improved this year. It's now at 1 to 9.58. Previously, last year, it was 1 to 9.9. So again, we're seeing improvements within our pay ratio. I think that's a fantastic achievement for this organisation. However, I do have to draw everyone's attention to the context within which pay policy statements sit and within which you know, we have a budget today, if anyone's not noticed, and there's an awful lot in the media at the moment, which is really, really concerning. So what we do know about is increases in work poverty, predominantly caused by poor hours in terms of employees wanting more hours for their employers, and also a lack of hours offered by the employers. Recent announcements as well have come out in the press that George Osborne proposes to cut tax credits, again hitting the people on low wage. 800,000 people are expected to be impacted by this budget today. That's just to make £1 billion worth of savings. What we've also seen in terms of economic growth, and the government loved talking about economic growth, is that the growth is actually not very productive and is actually predominantly in low-paid jobs. So as you can see, the challenges ahead are significant. I mean, I'm proud to say that Salford City Council are in a sense doing their bit, but it seems that at the same time as we do our bit, the challenges within the economy become ever increasing. And what's also interesting, I think, is that the Chancellor is more interested these days in seemingly blaming the global economy than tackling the real plight of low pay within the UK. I present this pay policy statement to you today, and I'm proud to present this pay policy statement because I think it's quite clear that Salford City Council, along with its Employment Standards Charter that the Mayor mentioned earlier, is being really progressive in terms of trying to tackle low pay within our local labour markets and across Greater Manchester. We're actively involved, as we all know, in the Greater Manchester Living Wage campaign, and I'd encourage many of the members in the Council to get active on low pay. However, it's quite clear to me today that the challenges ahead are significant, and we really need to up our game and start thinking beyond the City Council if we're going to tackle low pay within our community. So again, the pay policy statement here is here for noting and for approval, and I recommend it to Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions or comments? Cameron Greedo, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I would join with Councillor Dennett in welcoming the living wage which Salford are instigating. I don't think anybody would complain about that. I think everybody deserves to have a good living wage, and the sooner we can move to even higher levels when the economy permits, the better off we are. I think it's rather churlish of Councillor Dennett to actually criticise the government for not moving quite as quickly as Salford. Bear in mind that the government has to look after the whole country, and to move the whole country in one fell swoop to a much higher level is clearly virtually impossible, and one has to do this gradually. And I think gradually as the economy improves. It's very clear, Chair, that the economy of this country over the last 6 years has improved leaps and bounds. It is now one of the best economies in Europe, if not further afield, and it is continuing to grow. Nevertheless, there will obviously always be difficulties. You don't get growth sometimes without pain, and there has been a lot of pain, and one accepts that. I, for one, hope that that pain will come to an end soon, and I think it will come to an end much quicker with the guidance and administration of George Osborne. I look forward to seeing those improvements continue.
Thank you, Councillor Greedo. Councillor Merry, please.
I'm always fascinated when I hear Councillor Greedo speak, because he never lets the facts get in the way of the argument, actually. The fact is, and that's why I've rose to correct him, this has been the worst recovery from a recession on record. And indeed, it's thanks to the Chancellor's policies that we are in this situation in the first place. Right? He has failed. He has failed to stimulate the recovery. Absolutely. He has been reduced to something they accused us of blaming it on the world recession rather than his particular government. And I was very struck by watching the documentary on Clinton's first year in office last night on BBC Two. Sorry, Clinton was in office as well as the Secretary of State. I was very struck by the first year that Obama Here was somebody who was actually committed to doing something about the economy and prepared to actually put in the necessary fiscal stimulus to actually get the economy kick-started. We would have been a lot better off with Obama as our Chancellor, quite frankly, than Osborne. So, no, I don't think he's been a rip-roaring success.
Councillor Ferguson, please. Councillor Ferguson,
I'd just like to, it's not often that I congratulate Councillor Garrido, but on this occasion I'd like to, for being able to keep his face straight when he made a statement about the success of George Osborne's financial policies.
Thank you. Councillor Lindley, please.
Green, finally. I'll be very quick, Mr. Chairman. Here in Salford, since 2010, unemployment is down and down significantly. The number of jobs are up and up significantly. Wages are rising. There are more businesses and more infrastructure investment. That's a good thing. There's a lot more to do. I'm hoping we'll have some good announcements this afternoon in the budget on further investment in our infrastructure. But you know, that has made a huge difference, and it's why there are more people in work in Salford and across the North West than there have been for many, many years. That's a good thing, and I absolutely stand by that record. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lindley. Councillor Dennett, do you want to say anything? Does the Council agree to approve the annual? Does the Council agree to approve the annual pay policy statement? Okay. Item 9, appointment of Deputy Monitoring Officer. That item has been deferred. Item 10, appointment of Deputy Section 151 Officer. The City Director is asked to